From the head of the table, distinguished foreign visitors watching in horror, Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto shouted out to his army chief, Lieutenant General Muhammad Ziaul Haq, "Come over here, monkey!" The Prime Minister, Bhutto's biographer Stanley Walpert recorded, would pretend to pull Zia on an invisible string as one would do with a puppet. The cracks about the general never ended. His looks, his intellect, the promiscuity of his wife. Zia unfailingly responded to the insults with a genial beam and a grovelling bow, thanking the Prime Minister for his kind attention, sir. Then, in the summer of 1977, the general ordered his soldiers to take the Prime Minister out of his home for a drive. That journey ended at the gallows. Later this week, when Prime Minister Imran Khan faces a no-confidence vote that few give him a chance of winning, it is likely to be seen as a triumph for Pakistan's democracy. In 2018, Khan was installed in office by an election marked by the intimidation of his opponents, the misuse of the criminal justice system, and outright rigging. Khan's ruinous mismanagement of the country, the argument goes, made his position untenable even to his patrons. That isn't the whole story though. The general's ability to shoo their chosen monkey off the throne and replace it with a new pet shows the power of the Pakistan army over the politicians is undiminished. Last year, Prime Minister Khan began a protracted and ill-advised battle against Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa, refusing to sign on to the replacement of ISI Director General Faiz Hamid by Lieutenant General Nadeem Anjum. Lieutenant General Faiz is believed to have been instrumental in securing Khan's election. The Prime Minister was told, among others, rumour has it by his occultist wife Bushra, that losing Faiz would precipitate his own downfall. Imran's decision to push back against Bajwa and to ensure General Hamid's appointment as Army Chief in November when the top job falls vacant crossed a fundamental red line. The removal of Prime Ministers who sought to intervene in the military domain has been a leitmotif in Pakistan's post-Zia politics. The man Imran Khan replaced as Prime Minister and whose brother is now expected to replace him has been at the center of the story. Elected in 1990 in a contest again alleged to have been rigged by the ISI, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was seen as a reliable proxy by the military establishment. Like Khan, his politics centered around populist Islamism. He patronized Punjabi jihadist groups. Among other things, Sharif promised to make Pakistan's legal system consistent with religious law, the Sharia, and proposed the Islamization of the educational and economic systems. Nawaz's unsubtle efforts to buy influence inside the army, which included handing out upmarket cars to top generals, did not go down well with the army chief, also called Nawaz General Asif Nawaz. The army chief confronted Nawaz, who did not deny the allegation, former intelligence officer and scholar Rana Banerjee has recorded. Instead, he offered the keys of a new BMW to Asif Nawaz, urging him not to keep driving his old Toyota Corona as it was not befitting for the chief. Nawaz and General Nawaz clashed over the appointment of Lieutenant General Javed Nasir, a member of the right-wing proselytizing Tablighi Jamaat order, as the ISI Director General without even consulting the army chief. And General Nawaz's efforts to transfer out Islamist-leaning Lieutenant General Hamid Gul, who as ISI chief had ensured the Prime Minister's election, also caused friction. The army chief did not trust General Gul to hold charge in his absence and wanted him in a non-command position where his ambitions could be contained. Eventually, General Gul was retired over Prime Minister Nawaz's strenuous objections. Then in 1993, General Wahid Kakad was appointed army chief, superseding Lieutenants General Rahimdil Bhatti, Muhammad Ashraf, Farag Khan and Arif Bangash. Nawaz Sharif resisted this and ended up being forced out of office. Following Nawaz Sharif's re-election in 1997, fresh skirmishes broke out with the generals. Hoping to strengthen his influence, Nawaz appointed Lieutenant General Khwaja Ziauddin Butt as ISI Director General. The Army Chief, General Jahangir Karamat, was incensed at the decision, which once again was made without his consent. Karamat then publicly criticized profligate government spending and demanded setting up of a National Security Council to institutionalize military involvement in political decision making. In 1998, Sharif struck back and sacked Karamat. He handpicked someone we know, Lieutenant General Pervez Musharraf, to succeed him, superseding Lieutenant General Ali Quli Khan and Lieutenant General Khalid Nawaz Khan. Following the Kargil War, Sharif moved to sack General Musharraf, who had of course started the conflict without bothering to inform his Prime Minister. The general staged a successful coup. The Pakistan People's Party government, which ruled from 2008 to 2013, also pushed back against military influence over strategic decision making, at one point seeking United States assistance to set in place new civilian-led national security systems. The government survived, but its legitimacy was systematically dismantled by the military, which helped organize a series of protests, demonstrations, and judicial blows to the political order. Following the death of Zia in a still unexplained 1988 air crash, which has been blamed on the KGB, Mossad, CIA, hydraulics failure, poison gas packed in a case of mangoes, the generals had instituted a system the diplomat Hussein Haqqani has described as, and I quote, military rule by other means. The army chief, scholar Hassan Askari Rizvi has explained, became the pivot for this political system. He represented the institutional consensus of the army on the governance of Pakistan, which came about through discussions between the army chief and the corps commanders. German history reached its turning point but failed to turn. The historian A.J.P. Taylor famously wrote of the revolutions of 1848-49. The praetorian system in Pakistan ensured politicians who fought what's called hybrid democracy also met the same fate. They tried but couldn't change the course of history. Leaders in India have learned, usually the hard way, that the army makes the decisions in Pakistan, not its prime ministers. Asif Ali Zardari, elected in 2008, sought a historical transformation with his country's eastern neighbour, asserting that India has never been a threat to Pakistan. At about the same time, it is now known, the Lashkar-e-Taiba was finalizing its plans for 26/11. Zardari sought to put the perpetrators on trial and to assert civilian control over the ISI. He totally failed. Nawaz similarly promised to, and I quote, make sure that Pakistani soil is not used for any terrorist designs against India. His efforts to rein in terrorist groups and to have a dialogue with Prime Minister Narendra Modi were derailed by the Pakistan army. Ever since the 2019 Pulwama crisis though, General Bajwa has reined in terrorism, leading to a significant decline in violence in Kashmir. Emissaries for the Pakistan Army Chief and India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval are believed to have held back-channel negotiations to prevent the two countries from lurching into a conflict neither would want. Although it's possible General Bajwa will now get an extension in office from Pakistan's new Prime Minister, it is unclear how durable his India policy will prove. Musharraf, after all, had almost sealed a peace deal with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh before 2008. Fears that the deal might turn Pakistani jihadists against the country's army, though, led to it being scrapped. General Parvez Ashfaq Kiani pushed a very different vision from his predecessor, Musharraf, asserting that the Pakistan army was an India-centric institution. He insisted that this reality will not change in any significant way until the Kashmir issue and water disputes are resolved. The Pakistan Army's status as the country's preeminent institution of power rests on its status as the guardian not just of the country's borders but also its ideological frontiers. Ever since independence, the army has cast itself as the custodian of national identity and Islam itself. Letting politics and politicians usurp that role would threaten the general's very substantial economic privileges. In the unflattering mirror held out by history, Pakistan's new Prime Minister will be almost indistinguishable from the old one. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm National Security Editor of ThePrint.